All right, so moving on to the next segment here. Which NFC team will end up having the number one seed in the NFC? Will it be the Detroit Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles, or the Minnesota Vikings? So we're heading into Week 16. There is a three-way tie right now for having the best record in the NFC, with the Eagles, the Lions, and the Vikings all being 12-2 with 3 games to go in the regular season. So we're coming down to a 3-team race here for the coveted number one seed in the NFC. Now remember, with the seedings now, only the number one seeds in both AFC and NFC conferences get bye weeks for the playoffs now. So it's very important to have the number one seed nowadays, like it's always been, but it's more important than ever to have it for the NFL playoffs now, with the NFL having 7 teams. But in my opinion, this is tough, but I think the Philadelphia Eagles will get the number one seed this year. I just feel like they have a better chance of getting the number one seed rather than the Vikings or the Lions getting it with 3 games to go. All these teams are 12-2, but the Eagles just have the easier route to get the number one seed. They're currently hot as a forest fire. They're on a 10-game winning streak, the most impressive winning streak now in the NFL. They're 12-2, and to close out the season with 3 games to spare, they play all NFC East teams. All NFC East teams that they've already beaten earlier on in the season. They play the Commanders, the Giants, and the Cowboys. And the Commanders, I think they're going to beat them. This time around might be more competitive when they go on the road in D.C. to play the Commanders. But the story about the Commanders is they have not beaten a team above 500 all year long. Yeah, you look good, 9-5, but you haven't beaten the big boys, the best competition. So I think the Eagles are going to beat them. Giants are down and out. They're down for the count. They're 2-12 for God's sake. They're tanking behind closed doors. They won a top 1, top 2 pick for the 2025 NFL draft. So they're really not going to be playing for anything out there. And the Cowboys, they just don't have the star power to hang with the Philadelphia Eagles this year. And they could possibly get blown out once again by the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles. So, realistically, I think the Eagles will win out, get the number one seed in the NFC East this year. In the NFC conference this year. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a chance for anybody else, the other 2 teams, to get it. Because the Vikings are playing good. They are 12-2, just like the other 2 teams. And they've been playing good. Now, to close out their season, it's just a little bit more complicated than the Eagles. They don't have an easier route. They've got to, for the Vikings' sake, they got to play on the road against the Seahawks that might not have Geno Smith on Sunday. So that's definitely a winnable game if you play, what's that guy's name? He was just I can't remember his name off the tip of my tongue. Sam Howell, there we go. He was just the Commanders quarterback last year. So if they play him instead of Geno Smith, I think that plays in their favor. But the Vikings still got 2 pivotal games left on the season if you get past the Seahawks, because you got to play the Packers once again at home, and then you got to play on the road against the Detroit Lions to close out the season. And that, realistically, whatever happens with the number one seed, that Vikings versus Lions game could be for all the marbles for an NFC North title. So if you're not playing for the 1 seed, that could be for the number 2 seed. And there could be huge implications because the loser of that is not going to host a playoff game, most likely for the entire playoffs in the NFC playoff picture. So that's going to be huge. But again, the Vikings last 3 games, they got to play on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. You get a home game against the Packers, and then you got to go on the road for the final week of the season against the Detroit Lions. So that's hard. And if they win, and the Vikings' best scenario is they went out and the Eagles find a way to lose to either the Commanders, the Cowboys, or the Giants in their final 3 games, and they can snag the number 1 seed. Now, for the Lions' sake, the Lions have to win out to get the number 1 seed. Now, just when the Lions are 12-2, having one of their best years of franchise history, they get hammered with the injury bug. And I'm talking about big-time injuries. Heading into the weekend, they already had 18 players on IR. But now they got some more players to add. I mean, the list of injuries that the Lions have gone through this season. I mean, David Montgomery, the combination of Sonic and Knuckles, we'll have to wait to see next year between David Montgomery and Gibbs, because David Montgomery just went down with a torn MCL. Alan McNeil had a torn ACL. Aiden Hutchinson fractured his fibula weeks ago against the Cowboys. Carlton Davis, their cornerback, just suffered a fractured jaw. He's going to probably miss the rest of the season. Alex Anzalone, linebacker, has a broken arm. Malcolm Rodriguez, torn ACL. I mean, they've gotten hammered left and right with the injury bug. And this is realistically one of their best years of franchise history. But I will say this morning, when I saw Dan Campbell's speech, it made me, as a former athlete, got my heart pumping, gave me a little bit of goosebumps, and wanted me to run. And I personally will run through a wall for that guy, Dan Campbell. So I got to say, the Lions definitely have their head coach for the sake of the future. A team builder, a motivator, somebody that you definitely want to play for anytime you're putting it on the line. Dan Campbell's that guy to get them motivated and play through all these injuries. But the Lions' standpoint, with a very thin defense for the last 3 games, they'll have to play very well to give them a chance to get the number 1 seed in a bye. They're going to have to get some help, but they got to do their part and win out. Now, they do play the Bears. I think that's a winnable game, even though it's divisional. They go on the road this time to play the Bears. But what I'm seeing from the Bears, they can win this game. 49ers, I think that could be a tough game, despite the fact that the 49ers are not playing up to par. These injuries, I don't know. I think that I will say that 49ers game is going to be tough. And like I just said a few moments ago, that Vikings game to close out the season could be for all the marbles. If you're not playing for the 1 seed, that could be for the 2 seed and the NFC North Division crown. So we're going to see what happens, but I think the Eagles is just in their liking and in their favor to get the number 1 seed in the NFC with their final 3 games playing, once again, the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys. The Giants, Commanders, and Cowboys. With the Vikings, compare that to the Vikings and Lions final games, I just think the Eagles are going to end up with the number 1 seed. But those are my thoughts on who I believe will win, or who I do believe will claim the number 1 seed in the NFC.